Today, we're getting into a really tough case, one where family trust gets twisted into something absolutely terrifying. We're talking about the story of Zion Foster and how her own cousin built this massive wall of lies to hide an awful, awful truth.
And that quote you're seeing, man, that is at the absolute heart of this story. It's just a chilling reminder, right? That danger, it doesn't always come from some stranger in the shadows. So let's unpack how this trust was just completely shattered.
Okay, so where does this all start? Well, it begins like so many of these stories unfortunately do, with a mom's worry. It's the morning of January 5th, 2022, and something is very wrong. So, who was Zion Foster? She was just a normal 17-year-old kid, a high school senior working at the Detroit Wing Company, just looking forward to her future. Now, her mom, Sierra Milton, she admitted, yeah, Zion had a history of running away when she got mad about house rules. But this felt completely different. You see, Zion had permission to go out that night, and Sierra knew exactly where she was going, and more importantly, who she was with. And that person was her favorite cousin, Jaylen Brazier. Sierra had literally watched Zion get into the car with him. This wasn't a one-off thing either. She'd seen him pick Zion up maybe twice a month. So you can imagine she had zero reason to worry. He was family. That trust, though, it was about to be completely destroyed. All right, so let's get into how this whole thing just unravels into this tangled mess of lies. When Sierra can't get a hold of Zion, her first call, obviously, is to the one person she thinks will know what's going on, Jaylen. And this is where things get really, really strange. You've got two totally different stories here. On one side, you have what Sierra knows for a fact. She saw Jaylen in her own driveway just a few weeks ago picking up Zion. But on the other side, Jaylen's story is a complete 180. He claims he hasn't seen Zion in 3 years. He even goes so far as to say she was just using his name as a cover story to go see someone else, and he called her lies sneaky as hell. Just a total denial. And you know what? At first, his lie actually worked. Because of Jaylen's story and because Zion had run away before, the police initially just treated it as a runaway case. So the investigation, it pretty much stalled out before it even had a chance to get started.
But here's the thing about lying in the 21st century. Lies have a really short shelf life. The big turning point in this whole case didn't come from a person. It came from a neighbor's security camera.
So, just remember what Jaylen said. He was absolutely firm on this. He hadn't seen or spoken to Zion in 3 years. 3 years. But, well, the camera had a very, very different story to tell.
This footage is basically the beginning of the end for his lies. Okay, look at this timeline. At 11:15 p.m., you can clearly see a male and a female, Jaylen and Zion, going into his house. Then, at 1 in the morning, the camera catches this really chilling sequence of events. The car backs into the driveway, positioning the trunk so it's hidden from view. A few minutes later, the car drives away, and then just about 10 minutes after that, it comes back. The most important part? The camera never shows Zion leaving that house on her own 2 feet. So that footage alone is setting off all kinds of alarm bells, right? But then comes the forensic evidence that confirms everyone's worst fears. They bring in the canine units, and the dogs alert their handlers to the scent of death right in the trunk of Jaylen's car. Okay, so at this point, the evidence is piling up. Jaylen knows his first story is completely falling apart, so he switches tactics. He tries to get ahead of it by offering up a new story, a confession, that he thinks he can control. So here's his new story, the panic confession. He says, okay, yeah, she was with me, but he claims she just suddenly died on his couch after they'd used some recreational substances. He says he totally panicked, he was afraid he'd get blamed, and in that panic, he threw her body in a dumpster. So in this version, right, he's not a murderer. He's just a scared kid who made a really, really bad decision. Yeah, but this story was just full of holes. For one, he kept changing the details. The next day, he was blaming it on hallucinogens. Then there's the fact that he did a full factory reset on his phone just 2 days after she went missing. And maybe the most damning thing of all, in monitored phone calls from prison, he's heard expressing relief that her body hadn't been found. I mean, that is the exact opposite of what an innocent person would want. And what's really unbelievable is that for just lying to the police, he was granted early release and only served 9 months. But even though Jaylen was out, investigators were far from done. They started digging deep into his digital life. And what they ended up finding in his cloud storage, it was like finding the digital ghost of a killer. It revealed everything, his true actions and his real motivations. So 3 days after he says he panicked and threw Zion's body in a dumpster, what's he Googling? Not how to turn myself in or how to get help. No. He's searching, are garbage trucks also crushers? And then, what is the force of the machinery? He wasn't panicked. He was researching the mechanics of destruction. He was worried about how a body, could be totally destroyed. And finally, this one. How do police get your phone history? See, he's trying to cover his tracks. These aren't the searches of someone in a panic. This is cold. It's calculated. He's trying to figure out how to get away with murder. And then, investigators found the motive. And it is just terrifying. They recovered over 4,000 inappropriate text messages between Jaylen and Zion. This wasn't some kind of teenage romance. No, these messages laid out a years-long pattern of systematic manipulation, of grooming. He used his position of trust as family to become a predator, hiding in plain sight the entire time. So with all this digital evidence in hand, prosecutors finally had what they needed. They charged Jaylen Brazier with murder, and that brings us to the final decisive chapter of this case. The trial itself was incredibly swift. It lasted 2 weeks, and the prosecution called 32 witnesses. The defense? They called 0. The evidence was just overwhelming. They even had testimony from Jaylen's girlfriend at the time, who said she saw a deep scratch on his collarbone the night of the murder. His excuse? He blamed it on the cat. So after all that, how long did the jury take? Just 30 minutes. 30 minutes to find him guilty of second-degree murder and tampering with evidence. So what was the sentence? For the second-degree murder charge, he got 30 to 90 years. For tampering with evidence, another 5 to 10. And the really crucial part here is that those sentences have to be served consecutively. That means one after the other. The judge even said when he handed down the sentence that it was unlikely Jaylen would ever be rehabilitated. But even with the conviction, this is the tragedy that's still at the heart of this case. For 6 months, law enforcement and more than 70 volunteers searched a massive local landfill. A huge, unprecedented effort. But Zion Foster's body has never been found. So her family got justice in a courtroom, but they never got the closure of being able to bring their daughter home. So yeah, Jaylen Brazier was sentenced to justice. The system worked in that sense. But it leaves you with this really haunting question, doesn't it? How can a family ever truly find peace when the very person they were told to trust, the person they did trust, is the one who erased every single trace of their daughter?